Hey everyone, I know we're just getting started here, but this is the Ledger's Reporters Roundtable. We're going to give everyone a few minutes to hopefully join the call, but just wanted to see how's everyone doing today? How's everyone's week going?
It's Friday. We're headed into the weekend. So we're there, short week for most people, had Monday off. So a 4 day week. So in some cases, that's good. In some cases, that's bad. If you're trying to do 5 days worth of work in 4 days, it's bad. But, before you know it, it's Wednesday, Thursday, and you're headed into the weekend, right?
Yeah, I always feel that. I enjoy the long weekend and then I feel like I'm scrambling on the short work week, but we're almost to the end of that, so it's always a good thing, I think. How about
I
you,
do
Lynn?
feel, I
Oh,
do feel
sorry.
like there's this thing in the summer where we like coast into the summer and then it's pretty quiet and generally in the summer. I mean, I know we're going to talk about the news today and it's been a busy May, but fingers crossed that things maybe slow down a little bit and people get to spend some time away from work.
Hopefully so. How's your week been, Lindsay?
It's been good. I was just kind of reflecting. It's been such a long month, but it's also I'm kind of shocked that June is already here at the same time. I don't know. It just a lot has happened, and obviously we're going to get into it today. Just everything that's been going on in Charlotte, but it has been a very long May. It feels like.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I want to be cognizant of everyone's time, so we're just going to go ahead and get started here. We'll start off by introductions. I'm Ashley Faye. I'm the managing editor of the Charlotte Ledger. Like I kind of said at the top of the call, we like to do these reporters roundtables periodically. Haven't done one in a while, and I think that's just been reflective of us being busy and sometimes not being here on some Fridays. But I think this was a good opportunity for us to unpack what has been a very newsy and very busy May for our newsroom. We have here with us Lindsay Banks, assistant editor, and Tony Messia, of course, executive editor of the Ledger. So we survived almost. So I don't want to jinx it. We still got a couple more days of May. But yeah, so let's just go ahead and get into some of the topics. So I guess one of the biggest ones happened while Tony, happened to not even be in the country, but Mayor Vi Lyles announced she would be resigning from her post effective June 30th, which is the end of the fiscal year for the city. And I guess, when we heard the news, I know Tony, you were abroad, but we were talking about it. Was anyone surprised by this? And what do you guys think of that announcement? I know it's been a few weeks now, the dust has settled, but any takes on what all that means and what's happened since?
Yeah, that's a big question. And like you said, I mean, I've had a long scheduled family vacation over to Europe, left that Wednesday night on an overnight flight, was sort of dreary. That Thursday was on a train in Italy, and at 2 o'clock or so in the afternoon, my phone starts blowing up. The mayor's resigning. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm out for the next week and a half. So, but it was, I think I think the timing was a surprise. I don't think it caught people off guard entirely, at least the insiders and people who watch city council meetings. And, I know we're sort of among those people. I think anybody who has watched those in the last couple of months has noticed that something's a little bit off with the mayor, that she's not maybe not as sharp, not as focused. Maybe gets confused a little more easily than she used to. This was sort of the talk of insiders over the last month or two. And so I don't think the timing was a shock. I mean, she came out and she said, she wants to spend more time with her grandchildren. I mean, she is, I think, 73. She's been in this job for 8 years, has been with the city for, I think, 30 years. Certainly her right to leave. But I don't feel like we've gotten quite the full story on why that is. She's not really answering questions about it. But yes, I mean, to your point, Ashley, it sets off a big scramble because there's so many people that want that job.
Yeah, no, I spent a lot of that day just calling a bunch of folks up about it. And a lot of what I had heard from them was kind of what we had been talking about for a while. We know that the 2027 mayor's race was going to be competitive. We knew that a lot of members of city council have been eyeing that job. But of course, this puts into overdrive. As one poor person I spoke to put it, it starts the chaos clock a little bit early. And I think it's been interesting to see kind of how council has responded and maybe talked about the process of how to appoint the next mayor, which Tony, I know you did a piece on that this week. They talked about it at council. and kind of what comes next. But any thoughts on what we're going to see as far as the appointment? I know this is going to be a process over the next few weeks throughout June. The mayor did, WFAE and others reported yesterday that the mayor said she doesn't plan to resign until there's a successor in place. Any predictions on who we might see in that seat?
Yeah, so they put forward a process that's already getting started. They're going to open up applications to everybody, anybody who wants to apply next Tuesday. Now, the qualifications are you have to be a registered Democrat, you have to be at least 21 years old, and you have to live in the city of Charlotte. Those are the requirements. So they're going to get a bunch of applications. Now, it's a little bit funny because they said, well, we want to do this because we want to be transparent about the process. When actually, the way this is actually going to go down is it's going to be kind of hashed out a little bit behind the scenes. There have been a lot of conversations, a lot of text messages among council members, among very interested people. So, the bad news for you, Ashley and Lindsay, is that if you were to apply, you would not get. You probably don't even qualify because I'm guessing you're registered unaffiliated. But it's not. While it is nominally open to anybody, they're really choosing from a handful of people. It's hard to just walk in and do this job off the street. So, the name that keeps coming up is the mayor pro tem, James Smudgy Mitchell. He's been in elected office almost 30 years, very well known. The question is, can he actually get 6 votes? Can anybody get 6 votes? Yeah, I would certainly say he's the front runner, but it's not. It's going to take a couple weeks to play out. There might be some other names in the mix, other Democratic politicians. But yeah, so it's all under the umbrella also of what's going to happen in the election in 2027. And the council has said, most of them, they don't want to appoint somebody as mayor who is going to turn around and run in 2027 because it gives them an advantage. They don't have to do that, but that seems to be the preference of most of them.
Yeah, and I think that, a lot of folks I've spoken with about this say, well, there'll be a deal maybe where someone says, I won't run. I promise I won't run in 18 months and I'll just finish out by Lyles's term and that's it. But we know that that has not been the case with other appointments for mayor in the past. So I guess we'll see how it goes. More to come on that front, but I know we've got a lot of other things to talk about. Another big topic this month, of course, was the rescission of support for the I-77 toll lanes. We know these have been very controversial with a lot of folks in Charlotte, particularly communities on the west side. They have come out and spoken at various committee meetings. Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization, aka CARTPO, and other transit sort of public bodies and meetings about how they feel and that they don't like the plan. They think it's going to just be harmful for their neighborhoods. It has been talked about a lot on city council. I was at that meeting. I think it was May 11th. I was actually there for some other things, data center discussion, the budget, and some other things. And then at the end, that's when Councilmember Renee Johnson made a motion to rescind support for the toll lanes immediately after the council voted to pass a resolution. It was an interesting scene in the chamber. There weren't that many people left at that time. It was like 11 p.m. by this point. I would say there was probably a few dozen people at this point, a few reporters. And we were all just kind of looking at each other like, did that vote just happen? Like, am I understanding this correctly that this just happened? So I think that was kind of surprising, I would say. It was certainly something I didn't expect to happen. Again,
Well, I have to say, if I could just cut in, it's unusual to have that happen. Usually, these meetings tend to be fairly choreographed, and there aren't a lot of genuine surprises. I think that was a genuine surprise.
it was absolutely. And like I said, they had just passed the resolution 10-1. And like I said, I know you could do both, and they did do both, but it just still was so surprising to me. So I had immediately after that, I had caught up with some people from the Black Political Caucus of Charlotte Mecklenburg who were there speaking out against the toll lanes. And they basically said, this was a win for us tonight. We're very excited. And we're just going to know who voted for this and who voted against it. And that's going to factor into who we endorse for certain positions in the future. So even though it is ostensibly a separate thing from the mayor's resignation, I think you see thematically a lot of these things are kind of playing together here. But anyway, Tony, I know later in the month you then attended the CARTPO meeting. Can you talk about how all that went down? And that was kind of the sort of final death knell, I guess, for this part of the project, at least.
Yeah, again, another kind of unexpected vote was not on the agenda. The thinking was it was not going to be put on the agenda, and surprise, it was put on the agenda, and then they voted in favor of it, which is doubly surprising, really, because they needed a two-thirds majority because it wasn't on the agenda. So, um, it was kind of interesting to see. I think a lot of people were very surprised at that. This is a regional transportation body that whose say so carries a lot of weight. Now it's kind of weighted in that Charlotte has. I think it's around 40% of the votes on there. So kind of all Charlotte needs to do is pick up a few other people, and they did in this case. The other towns in Mecklenburg County, as well as the county of Mecklenburg County and the city of Monroe, to get that to carry. But there was, and it was really led by John Higdon, the mayor of Matthews, who you think, well, why does Matthews have such a big say on I-77? And it's not really that close, but it's a regional transportation body, and they can kind of do what they want. The big question is sort of what happens now. And the state is kind of taking a hard line that, listen, you got to start from scratch. You got to start back over through the normal process, and that could take a number of years.
Yeah, no, I know we did a really interesting Charlotte in Motion yesterday with WFAE's Steve Harrison, kind of looking at, what are some of the other options out here. Anyone have any thoughts on what is the likeliest outcome next? I know that we don't know for sure, and there's still maybe more questions than answers here, but what do you think is realistic for I-77 now that this has been effectively voted down?
I think
Isn't
it's
it
going to be
true
pretty
that,
loud.
yeah, well, I was going to say, isn't it true that 60 million has already been spent on the planning process, right? So now the state's kind of just out of that money, right? Is that the understanding?
That's correct. I
Yeah.
mean, they spent 60
Yeah.
million on the planning and preliminary design. Now, does that mean that all of that work is for nothing, or are there some elements of that they could use on some sort of scaled down project? I mean, the regional transportation body, CARTPO, needs to kind of figure out what it wants to ask for. Like, what is the consensus view of what should happen on that corridor? And it's probably maybe having less of an impact on the uptown neighborhoods. But this is I think, an 11-mile stretch, very congested. Anybody who's ever driven that, 160,000 cars a day. Um, would toll lanes have solved that? It was one of the questions. It just maybe not. But what can be done there? So they're a little bit sort of back to the drawing board.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess we'll have to see what happens, but certainly did not expect that. I knew again there was going to be some contentious conversations around 77 this month, but I certainly did not expect all that to go down. So that was certainly a big deal, I think. Another thing that I've been tracking, and I'll just quickly mention it because we haven't had a vote on it yet with council, is data centers. I've been honestly been tracking this one for a while, even before my time, I would say at the Ledger, but even since I joined in September, it's just been bubbling up more in conversations lately. A lot of people are just concerned about these hyperscale data centers, which are the ones that are powering AI and some of the heavy, digital infrastructure requirements our society now necessitates. So the city is currently considering a 150-day moratorium on data center development to kind of just figure out what regulations and policies it can develop legally around the land use of data centers. They've been allowed by right for many years now in most of the city, and I think a lot of folks are upset about that. There's one proposed in East Charlotte, and it's not a hyperscale. It's only about 40,000 square feet, but I think people are afraid it's going to set a precedent. There is a very large data center under construction now in University City that was approved in 2023. I was at the public hearing this week at council, and some folks were even saying, I think rescission's the word of the year. They were saying rescind all the data centers that we've approved in the city and rescind
Yeah.
support.
So Ashley, they don't have a lot of power to do some of the things that some of the activists were asking for. Is this a real issue, or is it just mostly kind of symbolic? I mean, you say, well, you put it on hold for 150 days. I mean, is that really that big a deal?
Well, that's what I think. I think a lot of these folks are going to be disappointed to learn that the city is going to come out with some recommendations, but data centers are still going to get built here. I mean, whether you can maybe put some more requirements around them, but your land use legality, and this is what the city's been saying, is kind of limited, especially after a Senate bill was passed in late 2024. I don't remember the number, but it basically effectively limits the local government's ability to downzone property. You have to get the written consent of all property owners, which just feels completely insane and not doable. It's not really a feasible thing. So because of that bill, a lot of local governments are limited in what they can do around regulations of this type of thing. So I think when we get to the end of that 150 days, we'll see what they propose, the city proposes. But data centers, I think, are still going to get built here. And I think that's going to be disappointing to the opponents who showed up on Tuesday. The drought,
We
we
got a
are,
question on data centers in the
oh, we
chat there.
do. Okay. Is it a small vocal minority, or are you seeing hearing a wider pushback? It's sometimes hard to say. The minority has been very vocal for sure on this topic, but I think it's coming up a lot. I mean, even people who I talk to who aren't showing up and protesting at city council meetings are concerned about data centers, and they're concerned about their power bills going up. What impact does it have on me as a ratepayer? I do think that's a relevant question to a lot of folks whether or not they're, outright against them or just have more questions and clarifying questions about what exactly a data center is, what impact does it have on me as a citizen and as a ratepayer especially. I think that question is common. I think that is widespread. I think people are wondering that. But certainly the level of opposition that we saw on Tuesday, I don't think is every single person. That's just my take on it, though. Want to move on while we're on the topic of big water and power and other needs. Water got brought up in the context of data centers because we are in a drought, and we may not be in an. I think we got downgraded from extreme to severe. I don't know if I'm remembering those terms correctly this week because we've had some rain. But Lindsay, I know you've been working on this. You went to the farmers market earlier this month. I mean, these folks have been dealing with the drought and dry conditions for months now. So tell us a little bit about what you learned and what folks should just know about the impact this is having on them.
Yeah, kind of like you said. I mean, I think the drought, I don't know when it officially started, but I think it's been since the fall or maybe early winter since the region has had like just, a good solid rain. So it has it's been something that's been building up and um, with restrictions going into place doesn't really they were more residential restrictions, not commercial restrictions. Farmland was not being told that they couldn't irrigate, but a lot of local farmers rely on well water and the well water level was, just extremely down. Like I talked to one farmer and said that usually his well is like overflowing. I think he said like 5 gallons a minute, just, typically. And, during the drought, it's been so far down, like not overflowing at all. And so it's kind of limited what farmers can plant and how much they actually can plant because if they don't have water to germinate the seeds even just planting you're just putting seeds in powder, one farmer described it, and it's not able to take root because there's no water. And we've had some like scattered random rain showers, which I think has made it a little confusing, and I'm not quite sure. I kind of get the general sense that not everyone knows we're in such an extreme drought, because we do get these like random pockets of rain, but it's not enough and it won't be enough for a while, I think, to just really reverse the damage. But because of that, because, local farming and even in other parts of the country, out west and in Florida are experiencing extreme weather, climate patterns, it's really raising the price of produce. If it hasn't already, it's definitely going to be coming in the next month or two. And farmers couldn't really predict how much to expect prices to increase, but I did get the sense, especially from local farmers, that they're going to try to absorb as much of that cost as they can. And then there's a whole other layer to farming right now with fuel prices and the prices of fertilizer, are expensive. And so that's also affecting prices of produce. But just locally, the drought is really putting a strain on what farmers can actually grow.
I will say I've never heard farmers say these are great times and things are going really well. It seems like it's always something, whether it's extreme heat or, labor costs or fuel costs or cost of commodities or whatever.
Right. And I did talk to the owner of Renfro Hardware in Matthews, David Blackley, and he was telling me that, it's not a great time for farmers, but it is a great time for home gardeners and people that have, smaller gardens that are growing fruits and vegetables because, they still technically can hand water. Restrictions haven't really affected that. And also, I mean, I think with farming, I don't quite, I mean, I'm not a farmer and I don't know much about agriculture, but dry is good for, farming. Like too much dry, obviously, which is what we're going through now, is not. But when, you have a lot of water, it can cause diseases and, with leaves on certain plants and stuff. So, dry conditions it's good if you can control, the water. So, the balance, I think typically you want that nice balance of wet and dry, but obviously right now the scale is tipped toward more dry.
Yeah, well, speaking of water and kind of a not really related, but trying to do a segue here, Lake Lore just recently reopened. And Lindsay, I know you've been tracking that and other sort of impacts and effects from Hurricane Helene. Can you talk about what you learned about that and what folks who maybe want to go over there and support Lake Lore from seeing so much tourism and other things dry up, what they should know?
Yeah, Hurricane Helene. I mean, it's been, I guess, a year and a half now since it struck Western North Carolina back in September 2024. And it's not shocking, I don't think, to me, but it is still, I don't know, it's still kind of hard to wrap your mind around the fact that the area is still in recovery. And Lake Lore, it's a lake town. It is a town, I forget how many residents, very small town, but the town is the lake and it's a big tourist area. Their like main tourism season is Memorial Day through Labor Day. And the lake has been closed since September 2024. The hurricane just absolutely destroyed the lake. I mean, debris. It's a mountain town, so it's kind of sits in a valley. So if you're thinking about like all the rain that's coming down, rolling off the mountain into the lake, all the debris and sediment and trees that it's bringing, I mean, there were like literal tons of sediment, debris. You also had, wood from like boats and docks and just like so basically everything just piled into this lake and it's taken a year and a half to clean it. And but now the town has reopened. It opened on Memorial Day. Reopened meaning the lake reopened. The businesses, there's a hotel there and some restaurants that have been operating for the past year, but they haven't had the tourism that they usually have. So I spoke to the mayor and she said that over the past year, the town has lost over 50% of tourism revenue, which, I mean, they kind of rely on. The town operates the lake, and, maintains the lake. So it's a huge milestone, I think, obviously for the town, but just for the region as a whole, because Lake Laura is very well known in the area. It's where a lot of people go, in the summer.
And what movie was filmed there?
Dirty Dancing. If anyone's seen Dirty Dancing, filmed at Lake Lure. And I think there might have been another film that was filmed there. Cannot remember off the top of my head, but still very like well-known area. So it's really exciting to see that it's come back online. I haven't had a chance to get down there since it reopened, but I'm really excited to see it because the mayor said it's more beautiful than it ever was.
Yeah, maybe it needed a little bit of a clean out. Obviously, the circumstances are not ideal for that, but glad to hear that they're reopened. And I haven't been out there myself. I've been to Western North Carolina many times, but especially post Helene, it makes me want to go out there and see it and support that community. I wanted to talk a little bit real quick about the housing market. I think housing affordability, I always say it's one of the signature challenges and issues facing Charlotte and other high growing cities, of course, in the US. But I hear a lot from a lot of folks that we're going to have to look way outside of Mecklenburg to find a house we can afford. I've had friends who've been looking in like Lincoln County and places that you would never think of as part of the Charlotte metro anymore. But that's because home prices have just risen so much. But Tony, recently you looked at how going out to beyond Mecklenburg isn't necessarily the deal it once was. What did you find?
Yeah, it used to be thought of that if you, really wanted a bargain, you could move out to one of these surrounding counties, to Cabarrus County, to Gaston County. That's still true to some extent, but not quite as much as it was. We looked at the data going back 20 years, and I mean, what you're seeing in some of these surrounding counties is the same thing you're seeing in Mecklenburg, in which housing prices are really rising a lot, especially in these communities that are closest to Mecklenburg, in Belmont, Mount Holly, Mooresville, to say nothing of Union County, Weddington, Waxhaw area. So the implication there, and that's just sort of that's a natural thing. As a region grows, that's just going to happen. Our commuting patterns are different now. It's not like everyone is driving to uptown like they used to. You have all these nodes kind of around where people work. So and there are a lot of things going on in Cabarrus County and Eli Lilly and different economic development projects. And I talked to a bunch of realtors in some of these surrounding counties, and they say, yeah, there are some pockets that are more affordable than Mecklenburg. There are some places that are priced very similarly to Mecklenburg. So it is possible, but you might have to go farther and farther out. Some of the communities I heard where there's still affordable housing, Chester County, South Carolina, that's south of Rock Hill. Troutman in Iredell County, that's a pretty good distance from uptown Charlotte. But I mean, this is what happens when you're in a growing region like ours.
Yeah, Vicky notes that Fort Mill is expensive, and I think that's a good segue to the census data that came out also this month that said that Fort Mill, I think, is certainly the fastest growing in the Charlotte region as far as the population growth. But I think even
As a
nationally,
percentage. Yeah.
as a percentage, yes, of course. But I think even nationally, it ranks among metro areas of its size or towns of its size. It ranks as one of the fastest growing. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely getting much more expensive to live even outside of Mecklenburg, and I think people are looking as far afield as Albemarle, as I reported in a story in January, which no one used to think of as the Charlotte metro. And I did a story earlier this month too, looking at folks who were lucky enough to buy a house either before or in the early days of the pandemic. Maybe they need more space now because they've had kids, but they don't want to move all the way out to Albemarle. And instead, they're t tapping into their home equity and doing these six-figure renovations on their houses. And I live in Commonwealth Park in East Charlotte. I have five on three streets near me where they're adding substantial square footage to their homes, whether it's a master suite or expanded kitchen or another bedroom. I profiled a family who lives in the South Park area, and they were saying, we love our neighborhood. We love that we're not far from the airport. We love our neighbors. We don't want to move all the way out, an hour away to buy a bigger house. So I think it's interesting to see how this housing market and the supply and affordability challenges is kind of translating to these other new decisions that homeowners are making.
Well,
Um,
it does seem like the market is slow. I mean,
it
the
is.
realtors are saying it's more balanced, which is true, but it's people are just kind of sitting in their houses more than they used to because a lot of them have very low mortgage rates in the, 2, 3, 4%, somewhere in there. And then there's the question of if you sell, where do you move to? Because can you get something comparable? It's getting hard in Mecklenburg, and yeah, do you want to move out to Albemarle or Troutman or Chester County?
Yeah, and I just think a lot of folks maybe aren't willing to do that. Also wanted to talk a little bit about some of the, I guess, people we lost this month. Ted Turner, obviously big name as from CNN fame, but he had an interesting time here in Charlotte, which our freelancer Mark Washburn, who's been a very long time veteran media reporter in Charlotte, did a really interesting piece for us earlier this month on kind of his legacy in Charlotte. And then we also had a Ways of Life obituary from Ken Garfield, who frequently writes for that section and other pieces for the Ledger. He did a really nice piece on Chris Thomas, who was an executive at Childress Klein. Chris is someone I have actually known for many years, covering commercial real estate. He was definitely beloved across the commercial real estate industry, the South Park community. He had a really big involvement here in Charlotte, just really left his mark in a lot of different ways. But I just thought those are two examples of they're not, the hard breaking news necessarily that we've been also chasing this month, but they're examples of the kind of the storytelling and features that we do. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on either of those stories, but to me, they were just some examples of some of the other types of stories we do really well here at the Ledger. And then I just on a lighter note, we have a few minutes left here. Lindsay, you did have a birthday this month. I know you mentioned May being a very long month, but of course, happy belated birthday. And as part of that, you put on your reporter's hat and did some shoe leather reporting on an important topic to all of us. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I will say I did technically take my birthday off. And I mean, I would have gone around collecting all these free things anyways. So I still was not working on my birthday, but it's kind of a little tradition I've developed over the years, just on my birthday, going around and collecting all the free gifts that you get from, signing up, being a part of rewards programs. And so I went around to, I don't even remember how many, maybe like about a dozen businesses in Charlotte, and kind of cashed in just to see what I could get. And wrote an article about it, letting people know, sometimes you do have to download an app, sometimes you do have to sign up for some things, but there are a few where you don't. And one of the local spots, popular spots, is Pinky's West Side Grill. And I will say that was probably my favorite freebie that I got. But you get a free banana pudding, full size, and all you have to do is show your ID and prove that it's your actual birthday. So that one, I think,
So
I
wait, Lindsay,
don't.
can I ask you? So in these places, the intent is for you to come in and have a meal and get the free banana pudding, not to show up and get a free banana pudding and leave, right?
True, true, true. So it is.
But I
I
know
mean,
you were
there is.
testing it out for science
Yeah,
purposes.
right. And then also, with some of the like apps that you have to download, you do have to be active. So, like, meaning usually you had to have like purchased something within the last like 6 months to a year. So you can't just download the app and then every year get a free drink or whatever and then never spend money at the company otherwise. So it is kind of, I mean, it's a loyalty program. You get rewarded for being loyal to the company and shopping there or eating there or whatever. But I mean, if you're going there anyways, and if you find yourself frequenting those businesses, might as well sign up for the loyalty program because you also get, discounts and free things throughout the year as well. But your birthday is when it's all, designated one day, or in some cases, you have like a window, like Jenny's ice cream, you have usually about a month to cash in on a free ice cream cone. But yeah, so I got quite a bit of free stuff on my birthday this year and thought I would share. So, yes.
Not share the banana pudding, but share the
No.
tips.
Yes, share the tips.
Well, it's a story that resonated with a lot of our readers because I think everyone loves a good deal, and what better time than on your birthday? And I see in the chat we've had a few other May birthdays, so hopefully maybe next year you guys could enjoy that based on Lindsay's hard working reporting, getting those deals and rounding them up. So that was a fun one. I enjoyed that. I'm certainly going to be downloading a few apps, which I don't like doing, but I will be doing to get some freebies. Just want to wrap up here. I know we're kind of getting close on time, but I just wanted us to go around the horn here and just say a story that we haven't covered that we enjoyed or kind of stood out to us. We obviously put out a lot of content, and some of it is, again, not always the hard hitting like breaking news, but there's still some worthwhile things I think worth shouting out. So, Tony, if you want to kick us off on something that stood out to you in May.
Yeah, I liked Michelle Crouch's piece last week, just looking at what the legislature might do as it relates to hospital systems. She's been reporting on Atrium and Novant, some of the other big hospital systems. It looks like the legislature is at least trying to advance some bills that would rein in CEO pay at Atrium, maybe open up some of their meetings more under open meetings laws, things like that. I just think the larger picture of sort of what the legislature is doing and how it affects our region is important. I had a piece this week sort of looking at, is there going to be any fallout from the I-77 toll lane debates? And so there's what is the question of how is the legislature going to kind of mess with Charlotte? What are they going to do? And it does have an effect here. So I thought that was the piece by Michelle was a good part of that.
Yeah, and it's a good way of showing that like these stories we report out, these things we follow sometimes for years at a time. There could be some, as if we do our jobs well, there could be some tangible outcomes there. So that's cool to see. Lindsay, how about you? What stood out to you in May as far as our stories?
And I think one of my favorite pieces this month was a piece written by John Short. He's a freelancer that we work with quite a bit, and he is a very big Charlotte history buff, I would say. And usually when he works with us, it's something related to Charlotte history. And so this month, he looked into the history of a neighborhood in Charlotte called Eastover. And it was kind of back in the 1920s, it was one of Charlotte's first like automobile centered focused neighborhoods. And I think prior to the 1920s, a lot of the wealthier suburbs of Charlotte were kind of built around the streetcar. And this was the first one that broke away from the grid-like streets and kind of was built around rolling streets and was meant more for, people living in homes to have private car access, which seems kind of crazy if you think of, what Charlotte looks like today, that it was ever designed any other way. But so he just kind of looked into the history of Eastover, and I think the story was a part of a series that he's going to be working on for us over the next year called Love Thy Neighborhood. So the idea is he's going to look at a bunch of neighborhoods across Charlotte and dig into their history. So that was just a really great piece. And I love pretty much everything John Short writes for us because it's really cool just to learn about. I mean, we're all the time writing pieces about what's happening currently in Charlotte, and I just think it's a nice break to look back and see, how far we've come and where we came from.
Chris Miller also echoes that, saying he really liked that piece. And Vicky wants everyone to know that Publix on Wednesday is senior day, and for Harris Teeter, it's Thursdays, and you get cake, which to me is the biggest pro tip because I love cake. So thank you, Vicky.
Mm.
So I'm gonna just round up here, follow or finish up here. The piece that I really love this month, which I'm not a sports person by any stretch, but this is certainly a different take on a sports topic, which is soccer moms, the cliche we think of and gets talked about all the time as far as, the overly aggressive mom showing up to the sports games with the orange slices. But Carol took a nice spin on that, and she interviewed a lot of Charlotte FC players about their relationship to their moms. And there were just some really heartwarming anecdotes and stories in that. I thought it was a really well done story. It was a fun play on this, again, term we hear all the time, and just was a great example of good storytelling and really human-centric reporting, which I think Carol is especially great at. So just really wanted to shout that piece out because I thought that was super enjoyable. Well, I know that was, we went a little over than we normally do, but we had a lot to cover, so I'm not mad about it. Thank you everyone for joining the Reporters Roundtable. Lindsay and Tony, thank you for sharing your insights and for chatting with us about the news. And hopefully we'll do these a little bit more frequently in the future. But thanks again, everyone, and have a good weekend.